We get some looks. Troy Lords took his pants off on the show. He was sort of wearing a pillow, but. All right. Hello, guys. We should be live out there on the Facebooks and the whole ton of other places. If you're just tuning in, we are going to be watching out on the Facebook. My voice, you can tell I've had one of those weekends. My voice just feels like it's going. But we'll have a conversation, have our conversations over on the Facebook page. So if you have any questions for our guests, please hop over there. I see we are live on the Twitch as well. Hello. Periscopes, YouTubes. And we're going to do some shares real quick so we can make sure everybody can find us. And especially that rockin' RWA crowd last night. Jeez.
Those guys.
That was a show.
That's always a show.
That was a show and a half. Jeez. It was like a mix of that was pretty much as crazy as I expected, and I also knew there was room for it to get crazier.
Yeah.
Like it didn't feel as dangerous when the fans were throwing weapons in the ring.
It sure sounded dangerous.
I mean, like I didn't feel like my video guys' lives were in danger.
That's good.
That's my gauge.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there was one guy that it was also a fans bring the weapons match, or maybe it was just like, I think it was just something with chairs.
Yeah.
Oh, it was Lodi and Edwins when
just throwing
like
the chairs in.
Yeah, when everybody threw the chairs in. And
Yep.
it was his first show doing RWA ringside. And he's like, what the shit did I get myself into? So I'm always careful about who we put up there. All right, we are live. We are there. About to get educated today. Daniel's in the chat room says Edwin is a great wrestler to watch.
That's pretty true.
You got fans out there already. This is good. They're waking up on Sunday for you.
Well, what else do they have to do?
That's true.
Church is let out.
Yeah, church is let out.
Church is let out.
It's kind of the perfect time.
Everybody had their brunch.
I'm not going to compete with church.
Why would you want to?
Exactly.
Nobody wants to compete with church.
I don't know. Church, Sunday morning was when I watched my wrestling growing up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where you can catch up. Sunday morning's
Yeah.
perfect for that catching up on whatever you need to watch. So it's kind of rare. Sundays are perfect because Sundays are like where you would get your Walking Deads and your your prime time. Like Sunday's one of the last scheduled television. Like you have to tune in on Sunday.
Or like the super series are still at.
Yep. Exactly.
All right. I think we are good to go. Looks like we got a few people out there. Let me throw a watch party up too while I'm at it. And throw this over on the Mayhem show. Nope. That's the wrong button. And again, if you're in the chat room, especially on the Facebook, if you want to drop any questions here, I may not get them right away, but we will be fitting them in the show as we go here. So
this is your chance to learn. This is your chance to ask the teacher questions directly.
That's right. And our guest, we have one question we'll ask today is, how did you survive the ladder match last night?
How did I survive? That's,
we'll get to that later in the show.
All right.
But it's definitely a good one because it was a packed show, so I kept forgetting how many people were in the ladder match.
Yeah. Sometimes I would forget. It felt like there would be 9 or 10 in there instead of just 6.
Yeah. Got crowded. Once again, a ladder match. I didn't feel like everybody was in danger. It was great. Okay, well, not on our end.
There's a level of danger.
You guys were definitely in danger.
Yeah, and that's probably how it should stay.
Yeah,
we're the trained professionals. We're prepared to handle that.
Yeah. Well, we almost had an incident the night before where somebody threw water across the ring and just soaked one of my camera guys. I'm like, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like a ladder was going to just like pop out and. All right.
Luckily for you guys, there was only 2 ladders.
Yes. Thankful on the reserved ladder stock. All right, here we go. For reals. Hey guys, it is the Indy Mayhem Show. I'm Mike Sorg at Sorgatron on the Twitter, and my voice is very raw because it is coming off of a couple of days of some pretty crazy wrestling shows, doing some video production. But we are here. This is a show where we talk about people in and around independent professional wrestling. You can check out everything at WrestlingMayhemShow.com and IndyWrestling.us for past episodes and a lot of great interviews of this program over the years. And of course, subscribe to it on your iTunes or your Google Podcasts or wherever you like to do the podcast thing, or find it on YouTube and the Facebook. Yeah, that's the thing, the Facebook with IndyWrestling.us. That's, of course, where we do go live there, amongst other places, but the conversation is happening over on the Facebook page. So follow IndyWrestling.us, Wrestling Mayhem Show on Facebook, so you can get those notifications when we do go live and when you see events for who's coming up as well. Also, if you have any questions for anybody that we have promoted coming up on those sites, you can drop us a line at goodtimes@wrestlingmayhemshow.com or 412-206-WMS0, as well as, hey, we can only watch so much wrestling, and apparently there's like twice as much wrestling as there was like a year ago, and it's just growing. So if there's anybody that we're missing out on that you think would be a great conversation for the show, please hit us up on those lines as well. We are taking requests and trying to schedule those out too. We've had a lot of great surprise interviews thanks to fan submissions as well. So it's Sunday as we're recording this, and while it may not be a school day, we are going to get educated today as the professor, Jakob Edwinn, is with us here in the studio. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me. Professor Jakob Edwinn, in for Sunday school. Mm-hmm. It's existed in the past, so if you've just let out of church, if you've just had your brunch, sit down and be prepared to absorb a little bit of knowledge. If you pay close attention, you might just be able to slip and fall and accidentally become a better wrestler, a better wrestling fan. There's lots of things that you can improve upon just by listening to me. Mm-hmm. This podcast is going to raise the collective IQ of your entire social media following.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for blessing us with your presence.
I appreciate it.
I guess first off, like we should mention, you are coming right off of a pretty hellacious ladder match last night. I believe it was a 6-way ladder match for a contract for number one contendership. Unfortunately, you didn't secure the win, but it was a very crowded front up there.
Yeah, it's that was 6 of the top competitors in RWA. Make no mistake, I tried my best, and it's something I've posted on Facebook and Instagram before. You may be able to beat me, but you're going to have to absolutely destroy me. I was, picked up. Jason Raditz picked me up with a ladder.
Yeah,
and gave me a jawbreaker. So if my speech is a little slowed down, I may not have gotten ice on it fast enough, and then just after, shortly after that, I was superplexed to the outside on top of about 10 people. So I may not have won, but they really had to put me away.
And I think like the majority of the field was helped out of the ring afterwards.
No kidding.
So yeah, including I think Rev even needed the winner of that needed a little bit of help too. So
right,
he was walking with a limp the rest of the night.
Yeah, none of us really walked out of that unscathed. You can't really escape a ladder match. I try to learn something from every match. There's got to be something I can walk away from. So I try to walk away from my matches improved, better than. Something about ladder matches or cage matches that you walk away a little less than. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's what they're designed for. They're designed to, be this penultimate or this ultimate clash of finality. And a ladder match is one of our highest tests of a pro wrestler. Not just obviously their smarts. I think a lot of wrestlers don't test their smarts these days, but test of physical acumen. The common man has had a fight on the street, potentially. There's no man that's been hit in the face with a ladder intentionally. There's no average man that's walked around that knows what being slammed on, slammed through, hit with, how heavy those ladders can be. You just climb a ladder to paint. or to get to the top of your roof. You don't know what it feels like to fall off of it if you're fortunate enough, and you also don't know what it's like to be hit with it. You know, I have a scar on my arm. If you follow me on Facebook or on Instagram, you can see that I posted, and I've been told the picture doesn't do it justice, but there's just a giant scratch and scrape from the ladder on my inner right arm, and you know, that's the least of it. You know, that's just what you can see. There's so many things you don't see and you don't feel that you just the fans, I'm not sure they can entirely empathize with it or really understand what we're going through. And so sometimes that's our own fault. You know, how many times do you see wrestlers out there being acting too tough, acting like it doesn't hurt? It absolutely hurts. I'll never understand that. I'll never understand trying to act like it doesn't hurt. Of course it hurts. But now I'm rambling. You're gonna have to cut me off sometimes.
So it's an education. It's an education.
Absolutely.
That's fine. Well, I first want to kind of dive in where the education started for you in professional wrestling. I like to ask people, what was kind of your first experience or earliest memory of professional wrestling for you?
As a participant or before that?
Before that, as a fan. Like, when did it kind of get on your radar?
The earliest memory I have, I don't remember starting to watch wrestling. I just remember watching wrestling. So the earliest memory I have, funnily enough, I had to be five or six, and we were staying with somebody, and a friend of mine and I put a $1 bet on The Rock and Stone Cold, and I unfortunately bet on The Rock, and he lost. And so from then on, I just, you know, a 5-year-old's brain is so undeveloped. I was like, well, Stone Cold won. I have to cheer for him now. And then I remember from that point on being a legitimate Stone Cold fan. You know, Stone Cold Steve Austin, obviously being, you know, one of the biggest wrestlers ever. And The Rock, obviously, right up there now. And Rock might be more of a household name. I've met plenty of people now that know The Rock as a movie star and don't even know he was a pro wrestler.
Oh yeah,
which is shocking and hard for me to wrap my head around. There's not much that's hard for me to wrap my head around, but now I can go back and appreciate obviously the merits of both of them. But that's my earliest memory is betting on pro wrestling of all things. And you're
the gambling 5-year-old.
Yeah. Well, Stone Cold won, and so now I have to cheer for Stone Cold all the time, and that's what I did. That's what everybody did. It feels like.
So, how did you kind of grow from that to like? At what point was it growing up or later on that you had in your head like, oh, I want to get in there. I want to become a part of this.
Well, in high school, I met a friend who I would eventually start wrestling with. But he was one of the first friends I had that also enjoyed pro wrestling. You know, I remember in elementary school, I found a guy who liked pro wrestling, and we would talk about pro wrestling until his real friends came around, and he would stop and ignore me. And I had never seen that before, and it wouldn't be until years later that I could really think about that and understand what was happening. He was ashamed to like wrestling and to be seen talking to me liking wrestling. That's probably the start of one of my more bitter demeanors, but then eventually in high school, I actually found real wrestling friends that were fine with talking about liking pro wrestling. And eventually, as we came to graduate and as it came time to ask, you know, what are you going to do after graduation, he explained that there were schools. There were schools for this. And that had never occurred to me. It never occurred to me to seek out a school to actually get into pro wrestling. Like for me, I was just a lifelong fan, so I was happy to just enjoy it. But then someone said, you know, you could do it. I said, you can do it? That was the end all be all. And you can find old pictures, and I post them all the time. Pictures of me in high school. I had long hair halfway down my back, long curly hair. I wore gothic clothing. I wore the trip pants that you got from Hot Topic, and I actually weighed about 230 pounds. And then when I first started wrestling, it was really the first exercise I had ever done, and that was enough to help me lose about like 60 pounds. I dropped down to 160, and then I was very slim, too slim really. Since then, I've been able to put on more muscle, but it was the first athletics I had really done, and so I was able to. The weight just fell off, and it really turned my life around. So pro wrestling it was the first thing I really cared about. Everything else was academics came easily to me. I mean, too easy. It was just something I could just do, and that that helps contribute to what I'm able to bring to the wrestling ring, where learning has been so easy. And that was the other thing is one of the first times I got in a pro wrestling ring, and eventually we would, after it wasn't even the first day, how many stories have you heard where pro wrestling training didn't start with, you never got in the ring until, days later after being, run ragged. But when we finally got into the ring, I remember being so excited. Nothing excited me more. And we were taught how to run the ropes, and I ran the ropes. And everyone before me, they said, all right, correct this, do this, do this. After I ran the ropes, it was said out loud by the head trainer. Some people, you have to sit there and you have to walk through everything. Some people look like they've been running the ropes for 6 months, and it's learning this stuff comes very easily to me. If I'm physically capable of it, I'm going to pick it up very quick.
Nice. Anything surprise you when you got in there and was like, oh, this is what it's all about? Like, going from a fan to trying to learn?
No, not particularly. I'm trying to put myself back there, but it was really everything I wanted it to be. Once I learned that you could start training somewhere and start being in a school, I started to read up and study up. Shockingly, I would study up and I would read, wrestlers' books about how they started, and everybody, it was a dingy little like dungeon. You hear about the dungeon and these dingy little like ragged places, and pro wrestling training does not start. Unless you start in the performance center, it does not start shiny and new. It's much more like a Rocky movie. It's very humble beginnings, and so that's what I wanted. I wanted every great started out with those humble beginnings, and that's what I wanted. So I was very happy to see that. And one of the first memories I have is the smell. You walk into a wrestling. Now I can walk into a wrestling training school, and I could be blind, and I'll know I'm in a wrestling school because it smells like a wrestling school, and just sweat and hopes and dreams, and a little bit of like iron from the blood or from the weightlifting equipment. Now it's almost intoxicating, but surprises, no, not particularly. I mean, you can never fully prepare for the characters you're going to come across in pro wrestling, just the types of people that it attracts and the types of people that try to do this all the time. I've never met people more eclectic than a wrestling group. I've met stand-up comedians. I've met bands. I've met people that would be, those are the most comparable lines of work. As far as comparisons of travel and how you start and how you gain success, there's a lot of ability in it, but then there's a lot of luck and who and I can really identify with a lot of comedians, stand-up comedians, and artists, musical artists that I meet and come across because we have similar weekend plans, and but even of all the artists and comedians I meet, wrestling still. Nobody holds a candle to the types of characters and people you're going to meet that are trying to become pro wrestlers and try to become these larger than life people.
So this presentation of the as the professor, was this something that kind of came from the beginning of it, or was it developing over time as you kind of got in the ring and started traveling and doing this?
Well, it was always present. It was always something. The professor is so me. But of course, you're told not to be you when you first start. All of the greats will say, and you've heard it over and over. The best characters or the best things you see out there are yourself turned up to 11. That's what you hear. But then when you start and you try to be yourself, you don't know what that is. You don't know what that looks like. You don't know what that feels like. So I was given something entirely off. I mean. My very first match, if you can call it that, I still had the long hair, and so my uncle lovingly told me, he's like, what you should be? You should be the Grateful Fred, this like hippie thing, and I wasn't even that familiar with the band, the Grateful Dead, so I didn't really know what to do with myself, but So it very unofficially, the very first match I ever had, I was the Grateful Fred, and trying to throw up peace signs, and I was very ill prepared in a lot of ways. But later on, when I had a little more control over it, you can find matches with this name. I started out as Jacob Young, and eventually that would become the Marvel Jacob Young, because I was a big Marvel fan, and I still am. So I would come out with Iron Man masks or Captain America shields or what have you, just trying to identify with kids, or like trying to be something I wasn't. Because as much as I enjoy superheroes, I'm no cosplayer. I'm no, I go to, I'd be happy to go to like a Comic-Con, but I don't like people that much, so I can't really be around that many people. But it was something I wasn't supposed to be, and then eventually it just kind of came about. Later in my career, about halfway through now, I've been wrestling 7 years. And RWA fans wouldn't know that, or the people that would be familiar with both myself and your podcast. But so about probably 3 years ago, I started really letting myself come through, and there was no better way to illustrate that than to just start calling myself the Professor. A lot of times I get asked, what are you a professor of? Where did you study? And I mean, ultimately, it's all just the ring. It's ring psychology 101. It's squared circle or geometry, and it's things. These are what I'm a master in. I'm a very well studied person and a very well read person, but as far as you're not going to find a certificate anywhere, but you're never going to question that when you can hear me speak. You're hearing me speak right now. You're not going to question whether or not it's not going to be a question of how smart I am. You're going to be able to tell that. You're going to be able to. That's going to be able to come across. I am the Professor, and that is me. So it eventually just came out. Throughout the years. So no, it wasn't my whole career, and that maybe slowed me down, but it was time. It was time to be the Professor. It came about when it was supposed to come about. I'm willing to believe that, and the right people have seen that. It's come across, and I don't know how many times backstage I was called a professor before I was called that on stage. Just people amazed by my knowledge or my quick wit, or encyclopedic knowledge sometimes of pro wrestling, and there's always more to learn. There's always more to study, and I keep going. It's easiest to go back by decade, and and that also comes from listening to the greats and understanding the greats and the more knowledgeable people. I have some of my friends can absolutely beat me in wrestling knowledge, and so I just listen to them a lot, and so I try to absorb what I can from them.
So I've seen this personally. The bulk of what I know about you is from being at RWA, and you've been there for I think 2 to 3 years at this point. Does that seem right?
2 years. Yeah.
2 years, yeah. And I've seen it come out. I think first with the faction, and now you're getting your own interview segment of sorts with Edwins Lessons.
Yep.
And I don't know too many places where they do more than send you out with a microphone to interview somebody. Like you have the chalkboard and a set when you're out there, and some interesting things seem to happen there.
Well, that's all by design as far as the set. I have seen places that use an interview segment, and all they do is 2 steel chairs that they had. And they just sit down and they have a microphone, and it's always something like the Love Shack with so-and-so, or the interview segment with what's his face.
Nobody has a Geratron 5000.
Right, and you're not going to be able to have the Geratron everywhere, but I wanted to have something that I know I could take with me, and I can bring that. That's all mine. That's not, that's something I paid for, and I had, and ideas that I had, and I wanted to have Edwins Lessons because it's exactly like you said. You don't know how many places do that, and if I was going to do that, I was going to do it completely. And I'm happy to do that elsewhere, but a lot of places won't make the time for it. They don't really want to shake up or have the variety in their show that way. And I really enjoy doing it. I really like teaching. It's it's kind of perfect for me. I really like teaching, and so and for some reason the fans really don't appreciate it. And I guess I come across as every teacher you didn't like in high school or in college. It's not that's not something I'm trying to do. It's just kind of naturally me. I like doing the interview segment despite how ruined it ends up getting. I mean, if I had it my way every time, it would just be me. But I wanted to do something to contribute to the show as well. I'm not entirely selfish. So I like having guests on, and it's either people that I respect, people that I consider a peer and that would be able to help me guest speak. Or it's people that I think really need to learn something. I don't know how many times I've tried to have Justin Idol on my show and teach him something, and it just will not get through to him.
Yeah, definitely. He's been having some marital issues that I think that maybe got weirder last night with that. Also, I do recall when you had probably the most unruly students of Chris Taylor and the Rev Ron Hunt.
Oh my goodness!
Time.
Class clowns. If I've wrestled actual clowns in Crazy Steve, they're the biggest clowns in pro wrestling. Congratulations to the Rev Ron Hunt on winning the ladder match last night. But it's not like he's not so physically capable. But boy, those two together. Maybe if I got them separately, I'd be able to actually get something accomplished. But the two of them together, those are the two kids that you split up in the classroom. You put them at opposite ends of the classroom if you can. Sometimes I've been that kid, but it's time to grow up. Those two, they were like children.
When you come out, I notice you're coming with a book a lot of the time. I also, and interestingly, if you guys haven't seen this, him in action, sometimes he needs to finish his book before he gets going.
Him is Jakob Edwinn.
Yes, and I'm like, is he just finishing it? And how does that come about?
You can't put down a good book,
even for your match. I get it.
And it's called studying, and sometimes you need to do last minute cramming. Realistically, it's just I don't want to listen to the fans. I'm not stupid. I don't know how many times I have to tell people this. I'm not stupid. I understand that the crowd is not going to enjoy that I come out. So I thank them. I thank them all the time because I know they notice me. So I just thank them for giving me the audience. But I'm more interested in the book than them. That's much. I don't know if you've been able to see some of the books I come out with, but a lot of times it's either wrestling related, it's autobiographies, or something about pro wrestling in general, or a time frame, or it's sometimes I read for pleasure, sometimes it's just Sherlock Holmes. Sometimes you just got to read a little bit about deduction and being able to solve the problem. That's a big thing about what I'm all about is solving problems. But yeah, ultimately, I'd rather read the book than listen to anybody in the crowd. It doesn't matter how loud they get, and they get very loud. Sometimes they get in my face. And here's another thing. While we're on the topic of fans and how annoying they are, I know you paid your money and everything, and I know that you're supposed to be able to say whatever you want, and that's great.
But some take large liberties with that.
Some take large liberties with that. I can't tell you how many little children have flipped me off, which just speaks to the parenting that they don't get, which is why I have to come out there and be their parent and be their teacher. But there's been a lot, every show I go to, this is the most unoriginal and wrong thing that I've gotten. Every show I go to, they call me Mr. Clean. I don't see it. I don't get it. I don't understand why they call me Mr. Clean. RWA has been the first one to bring props, though. Fans are bringing empty Mr. Clean bottles and pointing at me and pointing at that, and they're saying, it's like a mirror. It's like I don't see it.
It's like a mirror.
I don't get it. Personally, myself, I do not see it. But so if that could stop, because it's unoriginal. Everybody says it. And I don't know why everybody says it, but I don't appreciate it.
Well, at least he come off in clean in nature.
Yeah, there's no one else could fit that bill as far as just being squeaky clean in pro wrestling.
No. Well, it's been really awesome to see you growing in RWA and growing into that fan base. So, what is the in your 7 years of wrestling? What is the best and the worst thing about indie wrestling for you?
That's a touchy topic.
As much as you'd like to say in public.
Yeah, that's called a loaded question, kids. Best thing is the fun. You know, there's fun is the best thing to have, obviously. But why would we do this if it wasn't fun? Yeah, this is just what I've wanted to do, and sometimes I have to remind myself of that. This has been one of the few things that I care about since discovering wrestling, and at the time it was the only thing I care about. Now, you know, I've grown, I've come to care about a lot of other things, but it is still fun. It is supposed to be fun. As far as the worst thing is probably I'll go with the easy answer. It's the travel. You know, travel's hard. Travel's not easy for everybody. Not everyone's built for it, and obviously some people reflect that in their career. They don't travel that much. They stay right in their bubble. And you know, you can do both. How many shows do you come across that just run once a month? You know, there's at least 3 other weekends in that month that you could be doing something else. And that does an equal amount on our body that the wrestling does. You know, we go through some hell in a ring, but we also go through hell in a car or hell on a plane. You know, if you're working out regularly and you're a certain size, you're not meant to be crammed in a car like we have to cram in a car so often. Traveling is one of the hardest things, and probably one of my least favorite things. If I could just, you know, step out of a door and be in the ring or be at the show, that would be much preferred. As much as I enjoy, you know, going to different places, I've seen places I would have never seen just in my regular life. You know, I go as far as Georgia, South Carolina, down that way, and I've been as north as, you know, New Jersey, New York. I'm going to try and be in Canada this year, you know, lining some things up. It's the travel. The travel is good and bad. So I guess I kind of went back on my own answer, but being at the place is great. It's getting there. That's the hassle.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I have your busy schedule here, and after getting through that crazy match last night with the ladder match and everything. So where can people follow what's going on with you and get further educated on social media?
So I mostly just stick to Facebook and Instagram. I know Twitter's supposed to be the big thing. I just don't appreciate Twitter. Never have been able to. So both things you can find me at Jakob Edwinn. I've seen a lot of misspellings. It's Jakob and Edwinn, all one word. If you look those up, you'll find me on Facebook and Instagram. You know, both are mutually exclusive. You'll find things on Instagram that you won't find on Facebook, and et cetera, vice versa. You know, as far as like wrestling places, most frequently, you know, you can find me just about anywhere, but RWA is every month. In Tennessee, you'll find me in Pro Wrestling Mid-South, and coming up soon for a show called Millington Mayhem. You'll also be able to find me in South Carolina for WrestleForce, and for the show in Myrtle Beach, SHOW. You also in West Virginia find me for a Championship Pro Wrestling, CPW. They mostly run around the summertime, and you can, if you follow me on social media, you will see where and when those shows are going to be, you know, and the roles I'm going to be taking place in there.
Awesome. Go check that out. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everybody out there with the live stream and on the podcast for checking us out and expanding your own independent professional wrestling knowledge. Until next time, please support indie wrestling. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Cutting off Mayhem show after Raw tomorrow night. I'm sure we'll be plenty excited after an episode of Raw, I'm sure, to start our week. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks. So no other interviews this week, but I believe we have Gregory Iron